In this particular video, I'm going to talk to you about loss because that's where the subject matter is, and it's the most important thing that I think all of us could kind of take a look at. One of the things with loss that all of us need to remember and understand is that when you go through the period of loss, generally that represents that you have invested your heart. You've taken your heart and you have invested it in somebody or something. And in the process of investing your heart into that thing, you've gone through a process of not receiving, not reciprocating or getting back what you've invested. And then also it could be the person or the thing that you invested your heart in, there being a loss of that particular thing, whatever it is. So that makes it so that's why it's a hard transition for a lot of people to navigate, because they don't maybe they don't understand the full impact of how much they have invested, because the level of pain that you're going to feel when that thing is lost. And I can give you an example. One of my sons, my youngest son, he had a girlfriend that he was dating on and off for a period of time. She ended up going out one night with her cousin, ended up getting into a car accident. She ended up passing away on the scene. You know, that was a tragic, heartbreaking loss for him, because of he had invested his heart in her. He loved her, this young woman. So when he lost her, it took him a while to transition back into his self, because he believed that she was his soulmate and that they were supposed to eventually be together and so on and so forth. And so when I look at some of the examples that are around my life, I understand that a lot of the losses that we go through a lot of them are transitional, or they're part of a transition that we're supposed to go through. And some of them are things that we have to understand, that sometimes people may not be with us forever. As much as we love them, as much as we appreciate them, and as much as we want them to be, they may not be with us forever. But the thing I want to do is I want to discuss real quick. I want to discuss they say that there's 5 stages of grief, because when you go through a loss, then the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to go through stages of grief. And for everybody, the point that I would want to make is that your stages of grief are going to vary. You're going to go from one stage to the next. You're going to go from one thing to the next. It's not like it's linear, or it's something that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. It's something, and I'm just going to give you the list real quick. And the first thing that most people say is that you go through the stage of denial, where you want to deny the thing that happened. The second stage that people say you'll probably go through is a stage of anger, where you're going to get angry about what happened. Third stage is a stage of bargaining, where it's kind of the perception is that you're going to kind of wish that you could bargain with God and say, oh God, if you can, instead of them not leaving, maybe do this or that or whatever the bargain is. The fourth stage is going to be depression, which is a stage that a lot of times when we're in a depressed state, it's because of a loss. And we might not associate the two together, but a lot of times it's directly connected. The fourth stage would be a stage of acceptance. But what I did was I added a couple stages that I saw personally are affected, or that to me needed to be added to this list. And so the first stage that I have in my list is shock, or to be stunned, because when things happen, like the example I used earlier about my youngest son, when that situation happened, the first stage that he was in was a state of shock, where he just couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that she was no longer in existence, or she was no longer alive. And because this young lady I think she was late 20s or early 30. I forget how old she was, but she wasn't like she was, a 50-year-old person or something. She was a younger person. So he was in that state of shock, because when we're in the state of shock, we're in the state of we don't believe, or we can't believe, and we can't wrap our mind around what just happened. And because we're in that state of shock, the thing that I would say is that a lot of times, just because people say that acceptance is one of the last stages, I believe that acceptance is should be one of the first stages, because when you're in a state of shock, you still have to get to a point throughout this process where you start accepting, even if it's a small percentage, that you're accepting that this person is no longer with you, which will lead you to that stage of denial, where you're no longer denying that this person is no longer with you, or this situation is no longer going to be successful, or this relationship is over. You're starting to. So that's why I think that instead of acceptance being one of the last stages, I think the stage of acceptance starts almost from the very beginning, right after shock. Right after you go through that place of where you're in shock, you have to start accepting certain things. You have to start accepting that, you know, this person has passed away, that this relationship is no longer in existence, that this person maybe never even loved me. You got to accept that, you know what, this business is not supposed, so I'm no longer supposed to build this business. You have to start accepting these things, because as long as we're in this place of denial, then we're in a place of not really understanding and wanting to accept that, you know what, this thing that happened, yes, it didn't feel good, and yes, it's not something I wanted to happen. Yes, it's not something that I felt like it's beneficial, but it is beneficial because it's working out. There's things behind the scenes that you don't understand or even know that it's working out for you. So the thing that I would say is that, of course, after you get to the point where you start accepting some of these things and you stop denying, this is all of us, when you stop denying what really happened, then we can get to a place where we're going to be angry, because we're going to question our mind and say, why did this happen? Especially if it was something like a senseless act. Why did this happen? This is the natural progression that we go through. Anger. One of the things that I would tell any man that's going to watch this video is that you have to be careful as a man that you don't stay in the place of anger. That you don't stay in that place of anger. And I'm not saying this as if men have the have the patent on anger, but a lot of times the way that the macho male image is portrayed is the image of anger. And whenever you see a man that's very angry, he's a man that hasn't accepted things. He hasn't gone through the process of healing. There's a process of healing that he still needs to go through. And the anger is an outward manifestation. It's an outward manifestation that there's things that he has to heal and traumas that he has to deal with. My mind just kind of went to Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson talked about in a podcast that he said he was as angry and as vicious as he was when he was boxing, because that was a form of protection for him, because he was afraid. And to me, he was one of the best boxers that I can remember, in my lifetime growing up. And for him to say something like that, to me, was an empowering statement. And it should be to a lot of people, especially to a lot of men, to understand that anger isn't the solution. But the situation pops in or comes in is when we have these situations that go on where we don't go through the healing process. What happens is we will get lost in stages. We will get stuck in stages. And one of the stages that many people will get stuck in the process of grief is anger. They'll be angry with God. They'll be angry with the person, maybe the other person that drove the car if they lived. They'll be angry with their spouse. They'll be angry with their business partner. They'll be angry with somebody or something. And in the process of being angry with somebody and something, we don't see the part that possibly we played, or that part that possibly was beneficial and a blessing. There has to be a shifting in our mindset and our thought process to understand that, yes, I'm going to go through this stage of anger, but at some point I have to let it go. And this is why I say acceptance is an ongoing process from the beginning to the end of this whole thing. We have to accept that parent that we love is no longer with us. We have to accept that spouse that we loved and was married to for all these years is no longer with us. We have to accept that maybe this person had an affair on us. We have to accept that this business is not working. It's failing. The sooner we can accept the things we cannot change, the sooner things will change. We have to accept the things that we cannot change. There's certain things that are outside of our control. We don't know when something's going to happen or not happen. This is why we have to value the moments that we have. The next stage that most people go after the anger stage, they say, is bargaining, where they want to bargain with God concerning the situation that happened. God, if you do this, I'll do that. If you do this, I would have done that. But see, the thing that we don't realize is we don't know somebody's life path or their story or their span or their reason for their existence. There's things that we are supposed to learn from certain people throughout life. And once they've taught us those lessons, sometimes, and it's not that they're a bad person. Sometimes it's time for them to go to their next phase as well as us go to our next phase. We cannot, and I would suggest to you that you don't look at things as failures, but as transitions and understandings. Understand that your loss was a transition. It's a transition, and yes, the new transition might be tough and it might be a little difficult, but it's for your benefit. It's for your good. That's why you have to go back to the acceptance part. The part of acceptance. That's why I started with acceptance. After you're shocked, after you're shook, it's a process of us accepting these things. Because these things, when we start accepting them, then we can get to a place where we can understand that, it's okay to be angry. We're going to go through a phase of anger. It's okay to bargain with God and say, God, I wish you had done this and done that. And in the process of that, you're going to go through depression. And I'm saying this as a person who went through these stages, because I went through a 6-year period of losing a lot. The only thing that I did not lose was my health. I lost a business that I built for 20 years. I had financial losses. I had a lawsuit with a business partner of myself, a business partner, where someone was trying to sue us for $2 million. We ended up winning the case, but we lost so much finance in the process of fighting this case. So much time, so much energy, so much effort, all behind a lie. So the thing I'm saying is that you may go through a stage of depression. The thing I'm going to tell you about depression is depression does not look the same for everybody. When I went through my stage of depression, I didn't even know I was in the stage of depression. Because in my mind, depression was something that I know I was a person that would never experience. Because of who I am and the background I came from, and how I felt like at the time before I went through it, that you got to be weak mentally to go through depression, and because you have all these concepts in your mind about something until you actually go through it, and then once you go through the experience, then it wakes you up. But the situation was because I was getting hit with so many things at one time, of financial issues, lawsuit, situations going on in my relationship, so on and so forth. All these things were hitting me at the same time. It took me down psychologically. And when it took me down psychologically, I end up getting to a very, very low point. I can remember some days driving my truck and just for whatever reason, just breaking down crying and not even knowing why I was crying. And it wasn't until my mom came to me one day and she said, you know what, your grandma has come to me in a dream, and she showed me that you're battling a state of depression where you're just in a low state. And the thing that my mom didn't know is that I had gone to my grandmom's gravesite. And this is a true story when I'm telling you. I'd gone to my grandmom's gravesite. And I went there, and this particular day I was in a real, real low state. And I was just crying, and I was just like, oh, this is a bunch of BS. And why do we learn this religion? And because I was just complaining about all the things that I was losing and why I'd wasted all this time doing all these things. And, I'd been a good person, and I'd given to people, and I'd helped people. And I got a business that I'm losing. I got a person that's trying to sue me. I got this going on with my relationship, and I was just pouring it all out. My mother ended up getting a word, like a dream or a word, and understanding where I was. My mother's a very prophetic person. And she ended up writing. What she does is when she gets prophetic words, is that she ends up getting a book, like a notebook, and she writes out what she's revealed to her. She wrote that out and gave it to me one Friday night, because at that point we were eating dinner together every other Friday night. One night over her house, one night at my house, when I was married. And as she began to tell me the things in that book, she began to tell me things that there's no way that she should have known. Because the things that I said at a gravesite, and nobody was there. At that stage in my life, I no longer believed in God. I stopped believing in God because of all the losses. The losses had taken a toll on my heart. My heart was hardened. I no longer believed. And the thing about depression is I didn't realize I was in a state of depression until my mom told me, because I was still getting up going to work every day. I was still doing all the normal things that everybody does. But I would have moments where I just could not control my emotion, and I would just start crying for no reason at all. It was so bad that sometimes I would be driving my truck and I would have to go down and put my sunglasses on because I was driving, and my heart was just broken because I just couldn't understand why nothing was working out in my life. And I was a person that my only agenda was to try to do things to help people, and my heart was towards people. And the same people that a lot of times that I was pouring out my heart to, they weren't returning the favor. And that's why I started with your level of hurt and loss that you're going to feel is going to be in direct proportion to how much of your heart that you've given to that person, that place, or that thing. And the last stage that many say is that the stage of true acceptance, where we fully and completely open our hearts and say, you know what, I accept this situation for what it is. I accept that this marriage is over. I accept that this business is over. I accept that my loved one has lost their life. And because I accept that, when we get to that stage of acceptance, then we're going to get to a place of revelation, where we're going to get revelation and insight as to why this particular situation happened. But before we can get to that situation and get to that revelation, we got to get to the place of acceptance. We have to learn to accept the things that we cannot change. There's many things that are going to go on in our lives that we can't change them. As much as we might want to, we do not have the power to change them. Only God can. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, and share the video. Subscribe to the channel. Appreciate you. Thanks a lot. Arnold Alston.